What up, YouTube? Today we're doing something different. We're not going to be gaming. We're going to be listening into my own cryptid tales and taking questions and whatever and shooting the shit as we listen. So yeah, let's go ahead and start, shall we? Start. Parts 1 and 2 of Disturbing Eyewitness Encounters of the Dogman. What up, everyone? It is your boy, Cryptid Tales. Me, Joey Cryptid here, and I'm going to tell you this is very special. We are combining episodes of our Dogman series. So, yeah, without further ado, enjoy.
Content. All right. Starting off, talking about the Dogman. One of my favorite cryptids. I actually listened to a lot of Dogman stories late last year and was kind of really getting into it. So here we go. We got one of the first ones. Yeah. All right. Leaves crunched loudly under Jordan's boots as he walked through the thick brush. It was dark. The only things visible were illuminated by a small flashlight he held shakily in his left hand. In the other, he held his pride and joy. Canon EOS Elan 7NE 35mm SLR, the best camera he'd ever owned. Jordan just recently bought the camera, and had come on the heels of a promotion he couldn't have afforded to miss. Thankfully, he hadn't. Working for Country Wildlife was a tough gig. He spent 3 years in the mailroom before even being considered for more serious work. Jordan would never forget walking into Mr. Denton's office that day. The gruff old man even stood to shake his hand. Now, if only Jordan could keep from screwing it up. The problem wasn't Jordan, it was his assignment. Mr. Denton had been very clear that the only time he would be able to find a barn owl in Michigan was at night. It was rumored there was just one mating pair left in the entire state, and the DNR had yet to find them. Jordan was saddled with the nearly impossible task of finding the birds and taking their picture for the cover of next month's Country Wildlife, or CWWL as most people at the office called it. That was all fine and great too, except the owls were night creatures, and though Jordan knew he was too old for it, he was still afraid of the dark. It wasn't just the fact that darkness masked what was out there, it was that sometimes Jordan could swear it was a living, breathing thing lurking all around him, swallowing things whole.
Oh,
he knew
man.
better than that. Of course, the darkness was only an absence of light. He supposed it probably sprang from a frightening experience as a child, except that he couldn't think of what it could be. Jordan remembered a relatively normal childhood, weekends spent hanging out with friends, riding bikes through the neighborhood, and avoiding parents. His family was supportive without being overwhelming. For the most part, Jordan figured he had it pretty well. Not that it'll stay that way, a voice inside him whispered, and he shook the thought from his head, then steadied his trembling light. Breathing slowly, Jordan reminded himself that it wasn't that bad. Everything would be perfect once he got that perfect picture. That was all he needed. But now that he thought of it, it was strange that his dark room didn't bother him. But in there, not only was it red instead of black, but the shadows didn't seem to stretch out at him, reaching for him. His dark room, Jordan could be alone, in silence and peace. He could work on his photo, spot his work over his shoulder and have him change the coloring or tweak the exposure. And he worked on what he liked in that room, and it was his palace. A branch snapped off to his right. Instinctively, he dropped to a knee and lowered his light, bathing himself in darkness. He had to be careful. He was, after all, in northern Michigan. Jordan had done his research and found that it was possible for him to run into a bear, wolf, coyote, occasional mountain lion, or...
And the desktop audio up a bit.
Dogman. But Jordan was not the superstitious type. He knew better than to believe in overexposed pictures, shaky handwork, and terrible lighting. Any of the pictures he had seen on the internet could have easily been staged, in his opinion. He listened intently to the sounds of the forest around him. A squirrel chattered, giving away his position in the bushes. Crickets chirped melodically, and far away coyotes zipped and howled, echoing through the seemingly empty woods. Jordan didn't hear anything else. Could have been a dead tree branch falling into the forest floor. No big deal, right? though something told him that wasn't necessarily the case. And he wasn't sure why, but the feeling was strong, maybe like a gut instinct or something. Staying crouched, he waited and waited. When finally, Jordan felt confident that whatever may have been there would have left, he slowly stood up, shining his light all around. There was nothing remarkable or out of place. He could see no beast or man, and everything was all right. Right? And why did he feel this deep sense of dread? His breath came out in fast, steady plumes of large white mushroom shapes that dissipated 2 feet from his mouth. It was chilly, yeah, but he hadn't noticed just how damn cold until right now. Only a moment ago he thought of his promotion and a cushy new paycheck, and now Jordan's heart raced with such fury he felt it may burst from his chest, or worse, explode. Get hold of yourself, he mumbled under his breath, tugging his jacket down to cover his exposed lower back. The culprit of his chills? Maybe. Suddenly a startling call came from ahead. It was a sound Jordan had been waiting to hear all night, the elusive barn owl. In Michigan! Tonight, he would earn that promotion, though he could have sworn he had already done just that, over and over, again and again. He picked up his camera from where it dangled around his neck, checking to make sure the flash was on and it was ready to shoot. Slowly, walked toward the owl. Excitement prickled up and down his neck. Jordan was surprised to find this. Never before had he snuck up on something in the dark, and he found it exhilarating. For once, he wasn't entirely afraid of the dark. Jordan half welcomed it as his own camouflage, though the other half of him remained fearful for what might come at him from the dark. Nonetheless, he clicked off the small flashlight, thrusting himself into complete darkness. Jordan slowly crept toward the hooting. This was it. He was nearly certain that he would get his shot and prove to his boss that giving him the promotion had been the right thing. Finally, he was standing beneath the tree that the call came from. It was so dark he had no idea where the owl could be sitting in the tree. Jordan would have to just start snapping pictures and hope he could get a good one before the bird decided to take flight. He lifted his camera, listening intently. "Hoo! Hoo! Hoo!" the bird called. It sounded like it was coming from about 15 feet up and off to his left. Jordan raised his camera to his face, and though it was futile because he couldn't see a damn thing, he steadied himself, then began snapping photos. The first flash was extremely bright and nearly blinding. He clicked repeatedly, excited. There was the owl. Jordan could see it in the steady flash. It looked like the right one, if he remembered right. But where was its mate? If he had to guess, Jordan would say it was out hunting while the other watched over its nest. However, something didn't quite feel right, and he couldn't put his finger on it. Jordan wasn't privy to this information. He stood perfectly still, half not wanting to scare his subject away, and half afraid that there was really something out there. Jordan's lungs screamed for air, and he realized that he'd been holding his
Hey,
breath
what
in
up,
his mouth
Kiro
for suffocation.
Minecraft? What up, Aura
Bluntly,
YouTube?
he drew a breath
What
through
up,
his
Chris
nose, still not
McIntyre?
wanting to draw attention to himself.
Remember, you guys just getting in here, hit that
His
like and
body wanted
subscribe.
more,
We
more air,
do
but he denied it, knowing
stories
that if he
like
missed getting
this.
that
I'm going to
perfect
be
picture,
back to
it
be
could be the
doing
end of his
weekly
career. That was
cryptid
not something
stories.
Jordan was willing to live with.
And we are
A
going to be
shuffling of the leaves came
streaming
from Jordan's
daily,
right.
I believe, too.
Something was getting close to him. Keeping his breath low, he turned slowly, not wanting to alert whatever
How you
was
guys
out there in
doing?
his presence.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday.
Footsteps became discernible as the sound neared. Only 2 footsteps at a time, though.
You can hear
Jordan
me
was
talking,
afraid,
right? That's
confused,
like not
and
now, but like
anxiously
podcast.
excited
You can
all
hear
at
me
the same
telling the
time.
story, right?
He could no longer control his breath. It came in quick, rapid
All that
puffs.
matters.
Was there something out here? There had to be. Animals don't walk on 2 feet. But who could it be? Jordan's fearful mind flashed back to a movie he'd seen about cannibalistic mutant people who lived deep in the forest. Wrong turn. But that was unlikely, and he knew it. Maybe it was a hunter in search of an animal that got away. Who hunted at night, though? Weren't you only supposed to do during the day? Or worst of all, could it be that Mr. Denton hadn't really had the faith in Jordan that he claimed, and the gruff old man had sent another
Aura
photographer to
YouTube
capture an image of the
9840.
elusive
Chris
birds?
McIntyre. Appreciate
His
y'all.
mind wanders.
I need to be paying
goes
attention to the
forward in
portrait too,
despair.
guys.
Anger bubbled up after that. And if Mr. Denton did not believe in his abilities, then why would he have given Jordan the promotion? That old coot don't know anything about photography. Jordan could swear that Mr. Denton thought photographers had one of the easiest jobs in the world. He had no idea how hard it was to get that perfect shot. Everything had to be just right for a picture to work, from lighting to positioning, exposure, and beyond. There was so much that went into it. Cool it, Jordan, he told himself. Trying to control his anger, he took a deep, slow breath. So as far as he knew, everything was fine. Sure, there was someone else here, but it was unlikely the person was here to upend his career or eat him alive. When finally he was able to calm himself, Jordan realized that the footsteps had stopped. He felt more assured of himself and decided to call out to whoever it was. Hello? He called out gently, still careful not to scare his owl away. There was no answer. Anyone there? More silence. He shifted his weight nervously, and he knew he had heard the footsteps. He hadn't heard them retreat, so whoever it was still lurking around. If someone's there, please answer me.
Hey,
A
what up, King
low
Chronic?
growl came in response. Fear leapt in Jordan's
Fuckers in the
belly.
chat this morning.
It sounded
It's
like
what
a
we like to
dog,
see.
or a
It's what we like
bear,
to
or
see.
a wolf,
Look at
or
my
a
baldingness.
coyote.
Look at how
Jordan
thin my
couldn't be
hair is
sure
up
what it
top.
was.
Look
His
how
heart
thin my
pounded in his
shit is,
chest, and
guys.
blood roared in his ears.
Shit thin as
Calm down.
fuck, bro.
It's just a hunter out with his dog. No big
Shit
deal,
thin
right?
as fuck, bro.
His mind told him that it could be a
It's what
very
age
big
does to
deal.
you, what age and
Maybe he'd
stress
gotten
does
it
to
wrong
you.
about the footsteps. It was possible what he'd heard approach was a lone dog or wolf. The creature could be mean or rabid or extremely territorial. He had to do something, but was at a loss for what it might be. Jordan listened for the growling to come again. It didn't. It seemed he was at a standstill with whatever animal was there. He was nearly certain now that it was an animal. A person certainly would have answered him by now. Jordan was not going to leave without getting that shot, but he was afraid to turn his back to whatever hid in the darkness could attack him. Minutes ticked by, and Jordan stayed still, waiting for something to happen. He was in a stalemate. He could hear the heavy, steady breathing of the creature. It sounded huge. Jordan finally mustered all his courage and raised his camera to take a picture of the animal, then thought better of it. If this animal was skittish or easily angered, the camera's flash would irritate it, and he did not want it to be trampled or mauled by a bear. Slowly, he reached for his small flashlight, taking care not to alarm the creature that stood mere feet from where he was. Jordan held his breath and clicked the light on. It took his eyes a second to adjust, and when they did, Jordan saw that his flashlight illuminated two massive feet, each covered in thick black fur, and had extremely long, sharp-looking claws. Jordan stifled a gasp, nearly dropping his flashlight. Very slowly, he directed the light upward. The feet led to two legs. They were dog-like in shape and also covered heavily in fur. Near the hip area, hands came into view, each tipped with a curled claw, appearing to be razor sharp. They were human-like, but covered in that thick, dark hair as well. Suddenly, Jordan couldn't take it anymore. He had to know what he was dealing with here. Directing the flashlight at the creature's face, he screamed. Two bright yellow eyes stared back at him, set in a head that appeared to be half human and half dog. A long muzzle covered in fur held a surprising number of long, pointed fangs. On top of the creature's head were two pointed ears, cocked back and nearly laying against the animal's head. It growled low at Jordan, wrinkling its snout, baring its teeth. Dog man, he said breathily. It wasn't possible, was it? Were the rumors really true? Somewhere above him the subject of his photos took flight, fleeing into the sky. Jordan dropped his flashlight, stepping back. The light bounced and rolled, landing at the foot of a nearby tree. It illuminated low brush and dead leaves, and Jordan found himself trembling, trying to peer through the darkness. He didn't know where the beast was. The growl still rumbled in his chest, but Jordan found it nearly impossible to pinpoint where it was. As he took another step backwards, the toe of his shoe caught on something, sending him teetering, flailing his arms as he fell to the dry, crunchy leaves on the forest floor. He scrambled again, then stood, turning in circles, trying to decipher where the dog creature was. Jordan had lost his sense of direction, and couldn't even see where his flashlight was. Everything around him was the same stagnant and unyielding darkness. His breathing was rapid, ragged with fear. Jordan's heart pounded in his chest, sending blood roaring through his ears, making it impossible to hear anything. The growling turned to an angry bark, and suddenly Jordan lost control of his bladder. Warmth rushed down his thighs, soaking his pants and boxers, dripping onto his shoes. Jordan turned to run and tripped again. He found himself sprawled out on the leaves once again, in his own pee. Suddenly,
We
it
got
felt like a
5 likes
creature was on top of him,
on the stream. Let's go.
as he heard heavy footsteps veering to his right. Seems it was walking off. He took a breath and stood up. He looked all around in the forest and noticed that the scent that he had smelled was gone. He kept going and kept following the trail.
And we're just
Finally,
sciencing to see how this does, chat. We've already had more
he
people
went back
in the chat.
and got to his camp, packed up, and left. When he edited those photos, he got his promotion.
5 you beautiful
and he got
creatures
the
in the
photos
chat
of the
already.
owl that he needed.
Not even
He
10
also
minutes.
got
Yeah,
some
we're
photos
15
of
minutes in.
something that he cannot explain to this day.
Digging it. Digging it, guys.
The Dog Man. I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell.
That's better.
I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents.
You are
He and his
listening in,
sister were
chat. Just
together, and both
let me
of them
know.
went
Is
missing around the same
the
time.
story? Is that
The
story
parents lost
loud
sight of
enough?
them for a few seconds.
You can hear it
and
clearly.
In that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search for the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered
Yes,
in
clear.
hair
4
like a
stream in a
bear,
row. Yes,
and
yes
that
it
he had a
is.
weird face.
Yes it is.
We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter climbed up to a tree to get a better view of the forest. She never came back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere. We never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly have gone, because neither mother or grandpa saw her come down. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. Glad I wasn't there to hear it.
Yay!
One of the
Yay,
scariest
Kirill.
things I've ever
Appreciate you
had
being
happen
here.
to me involved the search for a young woman who had gotten separated from our hiking group. We were out late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large, rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got to keep her moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of the base ops, the woman turns to me. Her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area that night. A few years back, with a large group of scouts in Butano, SP, we were hiking some godforsaken dense forest trail in the wet California winter rains. The first night, the raccoons rolled a bunch of our bear containers down a gully into a creek. We were able to find them. The second day, we encountered a road and a checkpoint. The guard booth was abandoned. There were no signs, but we concluded that it was an abandoned prison. We adults would have gone in there, but we didn't want to endanger the kids, so we hiked on. Later that night, right around 1 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of a gunfire. It was about 100+ yards away, and it was not pistols. It was some very loud, sharp poppy guns. Different guns. It started off slow, and then after a dozen or so, a pause. Then more. Then it was steady for maybe 100+ or more, from several different guns. Then when the other gun stopped, the loudest one kept firing, and it wasn't full auto, but a lot of rapid-fired shots. Never got the count of the magazine between reloads, but this went on for about 20 minutes in total, then just stopped. I got out of my sleeping bag, out of my tent, hiked about 30 yards through the brush to the other campsite in the dark without my light on. Didn't want anyone else to see me. I got to the campsite, and the kids were all still asleep, but the other adults had heard it. I had no idea what it was. Maybe pot farmers in a gunfight with intruders? Next morning, it was a topic of conversation, but most of the kids had actually slept through it. After we left and got home, I talked to the ranger, and they said that sometimes people break into the prison and use the old gun range. My other story was camping in Big Sur, Silver Peak. I was alone, but only about 5 miles from the road. I had just finished dinner and laid down to sleep. After a few minutes, I heard kind of a crunch, crunch, crunch sound that was like footsteps outside. I moved my head to try to figure out what direction they were coming from, and they stopped. Put my head back down, and a few minutes later, they started again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Again. Lifted my head to see what direction they were coming from, or whether it was close. Nothing. This cycle repeated a couple of times until I decided to turn over and open my tent flap to get a look around outside with a flashlight. I was expecting to see a person out there walking around in the dark, but I saw absolutely nothing. Heard nothing. Zipped up, put my head back down, tried to go back to sleep again. More crunch, crunch, crunch. And again, I lifted my head, stopped. Tried to readjust, looked outside, and couldn't find the source. It certainly wasn't my heart, because that was thumping like mad. This kept me awake for hours that evening. I was terrified that there was something or someone out there who heard my head and stopped walking, only to continue. I thought I had fallen back asleep. Maybe past midnight, but eventually I fell asleep. Next morning, had breakfast, broke camp, and as I set up my tent, I noticed that my head was over a gopher hole.
It was a dark and stormy night. I was driving home from a long day at work. As I drove down the winding road that led to my house, I noticed a large black dog standing by the side of the road. The dog was so big that it almost looked like a bear. It was much larger than any dog I'd ever seen. It looked like it was just there, watching me as I drove closer. I shuddered and tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me.
I knew that black dogs were often associated with bad luck, and that seeing one was like an omen of death or something. Or maybe that was black cats. And it creeped me out the way it was watching me, but I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination as I closed a small gap between us. I slowed the car down to a crawl as I was getting closer and driving past the animal. This large black dog was like no other animal I'd ever seen before. Its fur was a deep, glossy black that seemed to absorb all light around it, making it blend into the shadows. But its eyes, they glowed with an intense light that pierced through the darkness, illuminating its surroundings with an otherworldly glow. As it was standing there, I could see that its limbs were long and thin, almost skeletal. Its paws were gnarled and twisted, each toe ending in a sharp, curved claw that looked like they could easily dig deep into the earth. Its teeth were long and pointed, gleaming in the faint light, and they looked sharp enough to slice through flesh like a hot knife through butter. I crept past the creature and continued down the winding path. I glanced back at the road behind me and saw that the dog was following me, except now it was standing on its hind legs, towering over the car like a dark, shadowy figure. I felt a chill run down my spine. The back window of the driver's side of my car was stuck halfway down, and the smell of this creature came wafting in. It was putrid and overpowering, a combination of rotting flesh and something else that I couldn't quite identify. It was as if the dog had crawled out of some dark, damp cave deep in the earth and brought with it the stench of death and decay. The smell clung to my nose like a heavy, damp fog, but it was beginning to dissipate, so I thought maybe it's letting up. I held my breath and kept my eyes fixated on the road in front of me. 2 more lefts, and I would be home. I didn't have the nerve this time to check and see if this thing was still there, so I just hit the gas. As I pulled into my driveway, that's when I decided to check the rearview mirror, and to my horror, there it was. I grabbed the keys out of the ignition, threw the car door open, and ran inside as fast as I could, locking the door behind me. But the feeling of unease didn't go away. I could hear the dog outside, scratching at the door and growling softly. I tried to ignore it, but the scratching grew louder and more insistent. My heart was racing, and suddenly the noises stopped. I looked through the peephole and couldn't see anything there. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door. The dog was standing on his hind legs, just outside on the front porch, staring at me with its piercing, glowing eyes. It didn't move or make a sound, but I could sense that it was waiting for me to do something. So I tried to shine the flashlight in its eyes, hoping to scare it away, but the dog just stared, unflinching. I could see more clearly now that it was not a dog. It was something else entirely. Suddenly, it lunged at me, its jaws gaping wide. I screamed and stumbled backwards, trying to get away from it. But it was too fast, and it caught my door. For what felt like hours, I was chased.
Really enjoy doing this stuff,
creature.
guys.
It could have got me at any moment.
If I can
It
make
chose
it
let
to
me
where
live so long as it
we
could
listen
keep
to it
tormenting
live,
me. I could
get
hear it
more eyes
snarling and
onto it, that'd be
growling
dope.
behind me, always just a few
More
steps
eyes
away.
and ears.
I knew that if it caught me, I'd be torn apart.
We already got it.
By sharp
One
teeth.
subscriber today already, so that's
I could
dope.
hear the sound of his breathing, deep and ragged, like the gasp of a dying animal. It was as if the creature was in constant pain, its very existence a torment that could never escape. In the end, I know the only reason I got away is because it let me escape. But I've never forgotten the way it looked, or the foul, putrid smell. I have a feeling that the creature was not of this world, that it had come from some dark, ancient place that humans were not meant to explore. And I can't help but think it will always be out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim to come along. Seriously though, Above Index is the only place in the world that I've felt that fear of imminent death from an unknown predator. I've been all over the place, in lots of hostile situations, and never have felt something like this before or since. But it gets better first. Some background. To get to Index, you have to turn off the highway and cross a river which separates the town from the surrounding hills. In crossing the bridge, you get this creepy feeling that the bridge is the only way in or out, and that the river is protecting the town from something else. The town itself is a nice little place under the shadow of Mount Index, which veritably looms over the town. There's an old wood frame hotel from the 1890s, a church, and some other architectural relics of the long-gone North Cascades gold rush. Index isn't a tourist spot, and is far enough off the highway that it doesn't get any drive-by business. People do live there, and they tend to look warily through their blinds at any vehicle they don't recognize. That's Index. If you don't take the turn over the bridge into town, the road continues along the river. This is the Index Galena Road. There are cabins and old mobile homes and hunting shacks along the riverside of the road. You can go a little further, and there's a Forest Service road to the right. This is Forest Road 6310, or something like that. It climbs up towards Gun Peak over a series of switchbacks. At the end of the road, there's an old clear cut with a beautiful view of the surrounding mountains. My wife and I already posted the wife's pics, go find them, went up there in the early fall once to picnic with a friend who wanted to get his new XJ Cherokee Laredo up into the mountains to try out his new tires. He was flush with cash at the time and volunteered with several search and rescue groups. Because of this, he had a Wheelin' full-width light bar with amber strobes mounted on the XJ. This is important later in the story. We got up to the clearing in the early afternoon, broke out the food, and enjoyed the setting. We did a little plinking, that kind of thing. We had one Glock 17 and SP-101 and 38 Special between the three of us. It was a bit cool. We gained a pretty fair amount of elevation getting there, and we knew the temperature was going to drop as soon as the shadows deepened. It darkened even more quickly than we expected, and we began to pack everything up. About then, we heard the first howl. It was a distant wolf, but there weren't supposed to be any wolves up here yet. This was in the early 90s, and they had not yet been reintroduced to the area. That was cool, we thought. Then I suddenly got a chill down my back. I wheeled around to look at the nearby tree line. Although the clear cut was still in dusky light, it was now pitch black in the trees. It hit me right about now, that primal fear. "We have to go," I said. Our friend looked at me and said something like, "You're afraid of a stupid wolf?" And then another howl on the tree line, not more than 20 yards away. We all looked at each other, collectively blinked at once, and did not waste any time getting into the Jeep. Somehow it was now dark already, and full dark once the road down entered the tree line. We could hear them all over, even over the noise of the Jeep's inline six, but the sound they made wasn't quite right. He started picking up the speed on the single-lane gravel forest road. I reached forward and hit the switch for the left side, seeing lights on the light bar. This caused a single halogen lamp to shine on the trunks of trees as they sped past, and showing the reflection of many sets of eyes in the darkness behind the trees. They were moving, tracking our vehicle, which was now doing about 40 on the narrow road. "We'll lose them on this straight," he said, now pushing 50. I hit the scene light switch again, only trees. That was silly, I thought. We're in a car and we get freaked out by some stupid wolves. Great. Now out of danger, we approach the first switchback, slow down, make the turn, and there ahead of us, about half a dozen huge wolves in the road, waiting for us. They had gone straight down the hill to cut us off the switchback. Then they were gone. What the hell? Now we're all freaked out. Now tearing down the road, sending gravel flying, approaching the next switchback. I left both side scene lights on at this point, but they all illuminated where the trunks were off the trees on the side of the road. I turned them off. We make the turn, nothing. No wolves. Suddenly, I had an idea. I switched on the strobes. Frozen disco stop motion of the strobes on both sides of the Jeep. The wolves, except they were all standing on 2 feet. Like men. They bound in off the frozen staccato stop motion, back down the grade, presumably to meet us on the next switchback, and then... I don't remember anything else. We were back on Highway 2 heading towards Gold Bar. I turned off the strobes. Stay away from Index after dark. A buddy and I have been kicking around doing to hiking and camping near Index to check it out. I was also to visit the location from that story. Back in the winter of 2001, my youngest son and I were on our way from Boise, Idaho to Medford, Oregon. We had taken a car trailer to his old place in Boise in order to haul his non-running Jeep to his new place in Medford. We hit an area of heavy snow in the southern Cascades around 2 a.m. It took 45 minutes or so to get down the mountain. We had, of course, been drinking coffee to stay alert. About 25 miles west of the pass, it became obvious that the last few quarts of coffee had to be drained. We stopped at a wide spot in the road near a summer tourist haunt, deserted in winter. There's a gas station and ice cream joint on the west side of the road, closed this time of year, of course, and no town or settlement within 30 miles. This is tall timber country and unsettled. Across the road is a small parking area for the ice cream joint. It's paved and about 200 feet wide and 80 feet deep. Pulled in, and as I stepped out with my 45 on the hip, it occurred to me in a flash that grabbing the 590 Mosey would be good. As we walked to the far end of the area to be well off the road, the hair on my arms and back of my neck stood on the end. The area directly to our front was open with a depth of 50 yards and a width of 100. The night was clear and cold, 8 to 10 inches of snow on the ground, and with a moon almost full, so we could see quite well. While standing and taking a leak, with my son about 15 feet to my right, I saw, as if springing from the earth in front of us across the open area, 10 or 12 creatures moving rapidly back and forth in a sort of a thatch weave pattern. These things, not human men, were close to 7 feet tall, thin, bipedal, with long arms, medium-length gray fur, and really fast on their feet. I brought the shotgun up and slid the safety off, as my son was drawing his .45. I don't know if I can adequately explain the overwhelming feeling of a menace, but here it goes. I've been operating on pure instinct since I stepped from the pickup. The rotten feeling hit me a split second before the things arrived. The feeling? Instinct? Was that we were prey, and subject to a very bad death, and to be slaughtered and eaten. Not a logical process, gut feeling, and massively overwhelming. As they were moving about in front of us, more appeared and mixed among them, all the while running about fast in front of us. Son and I were backing toward the truck. I would not present my back to them, and some of them peeled off right and left in an encircling movement. They were rolling in fast from the sides. I could smell and feel their presence. We got to the truck loaded on adrenaline, ready to kill, as we both knew we were in grave danger. We piled into the truck, locked our doors. I had keys out and ready. As my butt neared the seat, I had the engine lit and trans in gear and gas pedal mashed in one motion. Adrenaline is great stuff. As we fled, something very close by let out a ululating scream of rage and pain. I believe one or more of the group had gotten really close to us in their pursuit, and I ran over the foot of one of them. Yeah, they were that close. We rolled onto the highway, and I told my son to watch the bed of the pickup as well. It's pretty much retold the above tale. We hauled ass for at least 20 miles before the feeling of grave danger started to abate. The feeling that nailed both of us, as we discussed soon afterward, was the one of being prey, and soon to be slaughtered and eaten. I'm not easily led, and neither believe or disbelieve anything. That was from shock. And I'm never, ever going to go near the Index Mountains. Ever again. I've always been fascinated by urban legends and tales of supernatural creatures. I've heard of the Dogman since I was young when I first heard the legend played on the radio. A mysterious creature said to roam the forest of the Great Lakes region, and with my fascination came a sense of wanting to find the creature and to see for myself if it was really out there. Armed with a curious mind and a flashlight, I set out to explore the woods near my hometown. It was an overcast night, with only the dim glow of the stars to guide my path. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. I pressed on, my curiosity overpowering my unease. Little did I know how much of a mistake it was to ignore my instincts. After what felt like hours of wandering, I stumbled forward. Eerie silence blanketed the forest as if a switch was flipped, and all the sound in the world disappeared. Something drew me toward it, an invisible force urging me to step closer. That's when I surveyed my surroundings in detail and saw it. A pair of glowing amber eyes staring back at me from the shadows.
Ayeep.
My heart skipped a beat as the creature revealed itself. A massive canine-like figure standing upright on two legs. Its fur was matted and dark, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. It was a dog man. It had fixed its gaze upon me. A primal fear surged through my veins, and I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight in the process, and with but a moment's hesitation, I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The sound of heavy footsteps pounded behind me, growing louder and closer with each passing second. I could hear its snarls and the sharp snapping of its jaws, hungry for the chase. My breath grew ragged. My muscles screamed in protest, but the adrenaline fueled my desperate sprint. Branches whipped against my face, and the forest floor seemed to rise up to trip me, but I pushed through, determined to escape the clutches of the monstrous dogman. My lungs burned, and my vision blurred as I reached the edge of the woods. My house stood just a few yards away, its lights providing a beacon of hope. Summoning the last reserves of my strength, I sprinted across the yard and flung open the door. Slammed it shut. Panting heavily as I leaned against it, my heart racing in my chest, I felt a mixture of relief and terror as I looked through the window and saw the dogman standing at the edge of the clearing. Its gaze fixed upon me. Its mouth curled into a wicked snarl, revealing sharp, glistening teeth, and what looked like a cruel and deranged smile. For a moment, we locked eyes, a battle of wills between human and beast. I knew that I escaped, but the encounter had left an indelible mark on my soul. The dogman had shown me the darkness lurking just beyond the realm of our understanding. It was a sight I would never forget. To this day, I'm plagued by the memory of that night. The image of the dogman's glowing eyes and sinister grin haunts my dreams, a constant reminder of the terrors that exist in the shadows. I warn anyone who dares to venture into the Michigan wilderness, beware the dogman's domain. It may be an urban legend to some, but for those who have encountered its malevolence, it's all too real. I saw what I believed to be a dogman in the Charlevoix County of fall, 2011. I was deer hunting in my family's swamp near the Antrim County line. The swamp bordered Lake Michigan on one side and cornfields on the other. I was coming out after dark with only a small flashlight when I noticed some noise coming from a tree line about 50 yards ahead. Now, to put that in perspective, these swamps are highly populated with deer, foxes, coyotes, and plenty of small game. I wasn't spooked by the noise, but when I ran my flashlight across the tree line, I saw a 6-7 foot animal on 2 feet running away into the woods. I quickly got back to my truck and got the fuck out of there. I was somewhat shaken up after that. Spent plenty of time looking for the tracks the next day, but nothing came of my search. Several weeks later, a spotting was reported in Elk Rapids around 30 miles away. My friend and I are still trying to process exactly what we saw the other day. We've talked through it countless times, trying to logically figure out how this was possible. Hopefully someone on here can give us some thoughts. So, I recently purchased a small bass boat. My first mate, Lagov, and I have been super eager to explore the lake and its islands, as well as learn the fishing. We're new to Tennessee. Yesterday on the 4th of July, we decided to go fishing in this very secluded part of the lake we named No Man's Land, because of the low-hanging bridge that prevents boaters from entering the section. My boat can make it underneath because of how small it is, but I've never seen another boat in there. We decided to go deeper into the cove than we've ever been before. As we're slowly trolling down the lake, the path before us splits into 3 forks, and I ask which fork we should take. Lagov immediately says the middle one. So we continue straight as the water changes from a large lake to a narrow, river-like path. This is where a chain of events happened in quick succession. We've talked through it after the fact to try and recall the order of how this went down. First, we heard a weird vocal-like noise coming from the woods beyond the shoreline, and we both tensed up and felt very uneasy after. What was that? Lagov asked. A dog, I said, as that was the first thing that came to mind. I don't think that was a dog, Lagov answered immediately. Then we saw a bird high above us perching on a branch, staring at us. Maybe it was that bird, Lagov said. Yeah, maybe, I had answered. I'm not sure when it got into my hand, but at some point I drew my pistol and held it down at my side. Lagov held the fishing bow. We both had a very weird feeling as we drifted down the river, eyes glued to the bank. We came to a rotting pine tree that had fallen and was now half submerged in the water, sitting on the shoreline. Then it happened. We hear a very loud, heavy-footed animal running through the woods, getting closer to the water. At first I thought it was a deer, as it was almost prancing. But as it got closer and louder, we both realized it was in fact not a deer. It was a very large, jet-black canine. My brain thought, it must be a coyote. This one's much bigger, like a huge German shepherd. It was fast, like a black shadow, leaping through the trees and quickly approaching the bank that we're floating across from. didn't seem to have any texture and details, though, and almost like it was flat and blurry. We couldn't see fur or its face and eyes, just the outline of its body and tall wolf-like ears. But it was obviously the body of a canine. Adrenaline started rushing through us, and my brain raced thinking we were about to have to defend ourselves. It almost looked as if it were charging at us, but it was zigzagging and dodging through the trees toward the exact portion of shoreline we were floating past. We were scared, but the 15 feet of water between our boat and the shoreline gave us a little bit of confidence. It would have to swim out to us, and I didn't see that as likely. It continued us leaping through the woods and quickly reached our portion of the shoreline. In one majestic, fluid motion, it leaped off the shore and dove into the water right under the half-submerged pine tree in front of us. Stomp, 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 splash. That was it. We held our breath as we waited to hear it swim or move towards us. Small ripples reached our boat from the splash. After the fact, Lagov swears the splash should have been much bigger for a creature that size. Watch for it to come back up, I whispered. I'd never heard of canines being able to submerge themselves underwater, but here it was happening right in front of our eyes. We waited. Nothing. Silence. Just the subtle sound of the ripples it made slowly dissipating. We waited about 20 more seconds and still nothing. It was almost as if the entire forest had shut off. Silence. Our eyes were glued to the fallen pine tree it dove under. Maybe it's just standing in the water under the tree. Lagov says, we got the courage to troll the boat a little closer to inspect the tree, but there's nothing.
Go ahead.
No sign of it. At this point, we're in complete shock, stunned. It's gone. How could it be gone? How does something that big just vanish? Especially a huge creature like that. After 30 more seconds of silence, Lagov breaks it with, you saw what I saw, right?
You're gone, Jet.
Shiver flashes down my spine. All of it, I reply. Really, though, what was that? Lagov said. I replied, I think we saw a demon. We both nervously laughed. We stayed floating near the shoreline in shock for at least another 10 minutes, hoping for a sign that we weren't crazy. Lagov scoured the waters looking to see if it would come up for air. It never did. How the hell could a big black wolf-like creature disappear into thin air, or water for that matter? So being skeptics, there has to be a logical explanation to what we saw, but we can't find one. If it had just splashed the water and gotten out again, 1, we would have seen it walk away in whatever direction, and 2, we would have heard as anything putting weight on the leaves making a loud noise, but it was just silence. The absolute loudest of silences. We live in Middle Tennessee, if that helps at all. We're still a little shaken up by this. This is 100% true. Any insight will be welcomed from any commenter. Was this a dog man, or possibly something even more sinister?
That was all of that one. All right. Back here. You'll find 3 and 4 now. For parts 3 and 4. So that was parts 1 and 2 of the Dogman series. This is parts 3 and 4.
Compulsion to turn into wolves, either through being bitten by a werewolf or through a satanic pact. The term werewolf comes from the Old English werewolf, a compound noun of were, which means man, and wolf. But the other term, lycanthropy, is much older. The lycanthropy, ancient Greek lykos, wolf, and thropos, man, is a reference to King Lycaon, the earliest recorded Western werewolf who, according to Ovid writing c.8 AD, was transformed into a wolf by Zeus after the monarch failed to recognize and worship him. Werewolves have obvious symbolic overtones. Man and wolf have long been enemies, and culture has typically seen the two as opposites. The essentially good and rational man and the inherently evil and irrational wolf. To call someone a wolf was rarely a compliment, warriors accepted. In Anglo-Saxon law, outlaws were known as wolfhead, a reference to an earlier custom of tying a wolf's head around anyone whose life was forfeit. Beyond allegory, however, history also furnishes us with supposedly genuine tales of werewolves who were discovered, tried, and usually executed. And we're going to dump right into that. The Gandhian werewolves. The Gandhian werewolves were a family who, in the late 16th century, were accused and executed for being werewolves. In 1598, a young girl and her brother were attacked by a wolf. Benoit Bedell, aged about 15, had climbed a tree to pluck some fruit and, while aloft, saw a wolf dart from some bushes and seize his sister. Leaping down to protect her, Benoit drew his knife. The wolf rushed at him and drove the knife into his neck with a savage blow of the paw. Fortunately, a crowd had heard the commotion and chased the wolf away. The girl had died at the scene, and Benoit was taken back to his father's cabin, where he died of his injuries a few days later. Before he died, Benoit claimed that the wolf that attacked him had hands, like a man covered with hair. The wolf had been maimed by the crowd, and so suspicion fell upon one Perronier Gandien, who exhibited a wound in precisely the same place as the wolf had been injured. Unfortunately for her, one of the crowd that injured the wolf was none other than Henry Boguet, a notoriously merciless witch hunter. Boguet arranged a mob and executed Perroniet shortly thereafter. However, as he later revealed in his Discours de Sorciers, there were rumors that the whole family practiced black magic, and so Boguet had them all arrested. Perroniet's daughter, Antoinette, swiftly confessed to witchcraft, but her brother Pierre and his son George were not so forthcoming. Placed under observation, Boguet recounts how he saw them walk around on all fours, barking and howling, and covered in mysterious scratches. Boguet questioned them while they were behaving like this, and they confessed to witchcraft. The Perroniet family were burned at the stake. Boguet boasted of having tried and executed 600 werewolves in his career, which was according to Voltaire, and his writings are full of lycanthropic examples. Another notable case was that of Claudia Gaillard, later dubbed the Werewolf of Burgundy. Claudia was walking through the woods with Jean Perrin, grumbling about receiving so few alms when she darted into the bushes, and a wolf emerged. Jean dropped her alms, crossed herself, and fled the scene, later revealing that the wolf had toes like a human. When Claudia advised Jean that the wolf would not have harmed her, she was tried and executed. Peter Stubb, executed at Bedburg in 1590, is perhaps history's most notorious werewolf. Unusually, his tale is told in a contemporary pamphlet which was translated from Dutch into English in the year of his execution. According to the pamphlet, Stubb from his youth was greatly inclined to Yule. He made a pact with the devil, but had no interest in worldly prosperity or power, but only requested that at his pleasure he might work his malice on men, women, and children, in the shape of some beast. Satan gave him a girdle which transformed him into a wolf whenever desired.
8 minutes till we
Stubb
got an
immediately
hour
got to
runs.
work. Anyone who insulted
good
or
little
displeased
science
him could be
project.
sure of their death at the jaws of a ravening wolf, for he would get nor rest till he had plucked out their throats and tear their joints asunder. Stubb acquired a taste for blood, and progressed on to an indiscriminate murder. Cruelly, he would walk the streets of Bedburg, courteously saluting the parents and relatives of his victims. He would also identify victims in this way. He would await anyone who caught his eye in the fields and woods that surrounded Bedburg, and attack them in his wolf shape. Stubb's case is also notable in that his criminal lycanthropy included not only murder, but he would sometimes keep his human form, young woman, and then turn himself into a wolf to kill and partially devour them. He boasted that he could outrun any greyhound when in the shape of a wolf, so even the district's swiftest athletes were at risk from him. Within a few years, Stubb had killed 13 children and 2 pregnant women, tearing the children out of their wombs, and after eating their hearts, panning hot and raw, which he accounted dainty morsels. As well as slaughtering and eating livestock, a sure sign that he had become more beast than man. Stubb was also guilty of both his sister and his daughter, to whom the pamphlet is sympathetic, producing a child by the latter. Stubb even killed his own son, luring him to the fields and assuming wolf form before eating the brains from his skull. The most monstrous act that your man heard of, for nor was known a wretch from nature so far degenerate. Despite many attempts to catch him, Stubb's werewolf career lasted 25 years. Finally, and only because God desired it according to the pamphlet, Stubb was caught in his wolf form and surrounded by men who unleashed their dogs upon him. Realizing he could not escape, Stubb resumed his human form, but was witnessed transforming by the awestruck huntsman who recognized the polite man about town they all knew. Stubb was put on the torture rack in Bedburg and confessed to the above before being tortured. Red-hot pincers tore off 10 pieces of Stubb's flesh on the wheel, and his limbs were broken before he was beheaded and his remains burned to ashes. Kind of a brutal way to go, wow. Jacques Roulet, Jacques Roulet was convicted of lycanthropy in Angers, western France in 1598. One day, an archer of the Provost Company and some peasants happened upon the nude and hideously mutilated body of a 15-year-old boy. The blood-soaked limbs were seen still to be palpitating, and so it was deduced that this was a fresh kill. As the men approached further, two wolves were startled and seen to bound away into nearby bushes. Since they were armed and numerous, the group decided to give chase through the thick undergrowth. Nevertheless, they were not prepared for what happened next. A tall and gaunt figure of a man, with long, straggly hair and a great beard, half dressed in torn rags, strode forth to meet them. His hands were bloody, and beneath his fingernails were lumps of human gore. So revolting a sight was the man that the group could scarcely muster the courage to seize and bind him. They eventually succeeded in dragging him to the local town, where he was presented before the magistrate. It transpired that the man was Jacques Roulet, a vagabond who traveled begging from town to town with his brother Jean and cousin Julien. Jacques confessed to Maitre Pierre Hérault, examining him, that he was devoted to the devil at a young age by his parents. They'd given him a special unguent that allowed him to transform into a wolf with a prodigious appetite for human flesh. Of the incident recounted above, Jacques revealed that the two wolves seen feeding on the carcass were his relatives, Jean and Julien. He confessed to having killed and devoured children in the company of his brother and cousin, across the areas in which he was accustomed to travel. He also confessed to attending witches' sabbats. Jacques gave precise dates and times for his crimes, which were found to tally exactly with records of missing children and those supposed to have been killed by actual wolves. Unsurprisingly, Jacques received the death penalty for werewolfism, cannibalism, and murder, though his accused parents were found to be of good character and released. However, this tale then took an unexpected turn. Jacques appealed against his conviction to the Parliament of Paris, protesting that his confession had been given under duress. The Parliament decided that he was insane and instead sentenced him to 2 years in a mental institution. Perhaps Jacques was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and doubtless, as in Nyon, all werewolf and witchcraft cases were tortured to extract his confession. The inquisitors could simply refer to records of deaths in the area and force him to admit to the crimes. It is noteworthy, though, that the Parliament decided that he was mad rather than blaming his confession on the terrible torture he suffered, which is typical of attitudes towards torture in the 16th century Europe. It has even been speculated that mysterious unguent was a hallucinogen, leading to a series of wild delusions. Gilles Garnier. Gilles Garnier, the Hermit of Dole, was convicted of lycanthropy and executed at Dole, eastern France, in 1573. Our source for his life and crimes is another contemporary pamphlet, printed at Sens in 1574. Taking the form of a wolf, in 1572, Garnier first attacked a 10-year-old girl in a vineyard near Dole and dragged her into the adjoining Bois de la Serre. There he stripped her naked and ate the flesh from her thighs and arms. He then removed some more of her flesh and carried it to his wife, Apolline, to eat at their shared hermitage. Soon after, he attacked another young girl in more or less the same place. This time he killed her and wounded her in over 5 places, but was chased off by 3 men before he could start his meal. A week later, he again attacked, this time, a boy in another vineyard, whom he partially consumed before tearing off a leg for later. His next crime proved his eventual undoing. Having killed another young boy and dragged him to the woods, Garnier was surprised at his intended meal, and after retreating a distance resumed his human form, leading to his identification. Disgusted by the remains of half-eaten children in the district, the Parliament of Franche-Comté issued a decree in 1573 which demanded that werewolves be hunted down by locals and brought to trial. However, it was not these huntsmen who caught Garnier, but a group of workers who incidentally came across a hermit crouched over a dead child one night after returning from work. They initially thought the figure in the shadows was a werewolf, but as a light from their torches illuminated, they identified Garnier. Acting quickly, the men caught Garnier and took him to the magistrates at Dole. Garnier was, of course, tortured to extract a confession. He explained that he had spent much of his life as a hermit in the St. Bonnet Woods. He married in 1572 and fathered children, but struggled with the new task of feeding more than one mouth. Desperately foraging one night in the woods, a specter appeared to him and offered him an unguent that could turn him into a wolf, allowing him to hunt more effectively. He confessed to murdering 4 children, supported by the testimony of over 50 witnesses, and was burned alive at the stake. The Werewolves of Poligny. This is another case from Franche-Comté, a real hub of werewolf activity in the 16th century. The werewolves of Poligny were Michael Verdun and Pierre Burgot, alias Gros Fat Pierre, two men executed for lycanthropy in 1521. Their trial by the Inquisition drew throngs of people, and we have, as ever, a full and lurid confession of their crimes. Burgot said that one night in 1502 he was struggling to herd his flock of sheep during a thunderstorm when the three riders dressed in black approached. Burgot told him that he was fearful that his sheep would be taken by predators. One of the riders said that if Burgot would acknowledge him as his lord and master, none of the sheep would be lost. This he did, renouncing God and kissing the rider's corpse cold hand. Years later, he was weary of his pact, but was summoned to a sabbat in the woods by Michael Verdun, who bade Burgot strip naked and be anointed with an unguent that turned him into a lightning-fast wolf. Verdun had the same ability to shapeshift, and the two werewolves together waged a campaign of bloody violence against unwary travelers and children in the district. Between them, they first seized a boy of 7, tearing him to pieces before the alarm was raised. They also ate a little girl whole, save only an arm, and killed an agricultural workers indiscriminately. Burgot also confessed to tearing out a 9-year-old boy's throat with his teeth. Their chief motivation in procuring only free-range meat was a taste of warm blood, which they would lap up like a kitten with a saucer of milk. Shockingly, they also confessed to bestiality. Burgot and Verdun would seek out she-wolves, and stated that they preferred fornicating with the beast than human women.
Hey guys,
They were fine.
he's going to do an hour of that today, and we will be back tomorrow. So yeah, I appreciate everyone who actually stopped through. Aura YouTube, Krill Minecraft, Chris McIntyre, King Chronic, JKPYT. Yeah, appreciate y'all. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to be doing this, but if anything, we're probably going to be playing Arc Raiders. So yeah, appreciate